for upgrading the standard of living of these people. Okay, and here's another example of the kind of things that they're doing. So this is an area that was taken over by ranchers. It was all former rubber forest where rubber tappers were working. This is where Chico Mendes was killed fighting the deforestation and the giant ranches. So now there's this land that some of it's been abandoned by the ranchers or somehow taken over by the government to provide housing. So they're building these little concrete houses, and you can see this huge giant row of them along the road. And I hope you can see that. And a little closer look, and this is what they look like. They're brand new. They haven't even been moved into. And you can see the burning there. It's just the land management tool that everyone uses to burn the vegetation. So, here's some facts. The state of Acre still has about 80% forest cover. What I saw was where you could get to by a road. So by definition, if you can get to it by a road, it's going to be deforested. And so as I said, this was the region that was cleared by ranchers during the days of Chico Mendes in the 1980s. But this government here in Acre is actually a very progressive government, and they have a lot of new conservation programs. They're all centered around land use zoning, with lots of different kinds of zoning units, including indigenous reserves, extractive reserves where rubber tapping is happening, and plus there's a requirement that 80% of the private land retain forest. The state's now buying certified wood. The basic tool of control is satellite monitoring for illegal activity. The problem is leakage. So for instance, they've ended logging in this area, so they're logging over the border in Bolivia. And this is Lou's contention that biochar, we talked about a lot while I was there. Biochar offers little or nothing to resist the general sweep of development and deforestation in this region. But it can be part of the process of creating better agricultural practices and upgrading this land that has been so severely impacted. And it can improve the lives of the people who are there. Okay, so next trip, next excursion was to see the geoglyphs. These are amazing. They have just been discovered really recently. And people think, it must have some connection to the same civilization that created the soils. It's the same time period and it's a similar level of effort. These, and this is, I visited these two on this below side of the road. And they're quite large, as you can see, earthworks, and they're called geoglyphs. They're basically trenches dug into the earth. Now that there's been so much forest clearing, these things are visible. And they've found 200 or 300 of them in this area of Acre.
Do you know the purpose?
No. So here they are on the ground. I have some ideas we can talk about later. Here it is on the ground, and you can see that's quite a precise square corner there that's might have been created like 3,000 years ago, and with all the rain and everything else, it's still there. So you can imagine how precise it looked when it was first created. So you get a sense of the scale of that ditch. And there's my friend Lou, totally blissed out. He loved these things. He said he could feel the ancient spirits there. And then this man here in the bottom is the person who took us there. He's the expert on geoglyphs. He's actually a paleobotanist, and he's explaining to us that he can feel the spirits of the paleo biology there, the megafauna that are now extinct, and the previous climate and ecozone that was there before. The tree he's pointing to has a thick bark like cork. That is a fire-adapted tree. That's an indication that this area was not always a rainforest. Not too long ago, it was a savanna with a fire history. This tree here, you probably can't really see, but can you see the thorns there? It's got these intense thorns on it. That was to discourage browsing from megafauna. So it's sometime in the not too distant past, there were megafauna here roaming a savanna. So we're talking, giant camels and I don't know what all they had. But this genetic stock is still here in the forest, and it's just an indication that this region has changed over time, hasn't always been a rainforest. And so this was a wonderful treat to get to go out with this foremost expert on the geoglyphs and on the paleobiology of the region. And then his name was Alceo Ranzi, and then he took us to meet this fellow, his name is Chico Abacate, which means Chico avocado, because he's growing some avocados in an avocado orchard. And he's just a lovely man. He called himself a caboclo, which means a forest spirit, which is also a term for the kind of Indian mestizo people who are the former rubber tappers. He's a former rubber tapper. And what happened was when the forests were cleared, you know, and the serengeros, who were the people who kind of ran the rubber operations, sold the land to the ranchers. Some of the workers actually managed to get pieces of land. So he was given 60 hectares of land, and unlike everybody else who got this land, he didn't clear it to put cows on it, and he kept it in forest. So he's one of the few people Lou said that he's met who really, really loves the forest. Most people in Acre have a lot of sentiment about the forest, sentimentality about the rubber tapper way of life, but they're actually really happy to have electricity and TV and refrigerators and, you know, like people around the world. We like these things. But this man is a dedicated forest spirit, forest lover. This is his house. I don't know if you can see the beautiful artwork. He's an artist. And he's got, you know, a dedication to San Francisco, St. Francis, the patron saint of nature. And that's the forest that he's keeping intact. He's trying to make a little money by selling avocados, and up in the right-hand corner, you probably can't really see it, but that's the vegetable ivory, you know, like this necklace that they make jewelry out of. So he's growing that, hoping he could sell that to make money, but he doesn't have a market. You know, he's really just kind of scraping by his day to survive, but he doesn't care. He's happy. He loves the forest. He's so happy to preserve that forest. So this is throughout Rio Blanco, then back in town. There are a lot of memorials to the rubber tapper way of life. This is the Chico Mendez forest, and there's a whole, you know, history there, timeline history. The government has put a lot of money into memorializing this Chico Mendez. I think mainly since Lula came to power in the Labor Party, they really have honored the memory of Chico Mendez and the rubber tapper way of life. So in this park, they actually have a former rubber tapper who will demonstrate for you how the rubber was tapped, which he's doing here. You can see the latex running off and dripping off the tree. And up there, he's curing the latex. And he's got a really neat little thing. I don't know if you can actually see it. That thing that looks like a volcano that's smoking the rubber. Of course, he's actually making charcoal in that. So, there's another way you can make charcoal. And this is back at pictures from back at Fortaleza, the retreat center. And they also, you know, they preserved the original rubber tapper's cabin there. That's how people used to live, in that kind of very simple thatch roofed hut. Because they have a lot of nostalgia about that way of life and about the forests that were there until so recently. There's a picture of Chico Mendez. Here's a picture of Marina Silva, the Green Party candidate for president, who won almost 20% of the vote just last week. The elections were last week. And has shaken up Brazilian politics because she's forced to run off now between the Labor Party candidate, the successor to Lula, and the more conservative neoliberal candidate. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But, you know, Marina Silva's from this area. She was involved with all the Rubber Tappers Union work with Chico Mendez. So finally, towards the end of my visit, we managed to arrange a presentation on biochar at the Chico Mendez Library. You know, my friends called their friends, and so a few people from different NGOs and different agencies showed up to hear about biochar. And that actually was successful, and those people told some other people, so I got invited to present at the Environmental Secretariat, and that was covered by 3 TV stations, and so that got some interest, and they're at the end of the road, they don't get a lot of new people there, so I would never been in so demand, it was very flattering, but they were actually sincerely interested in biochar. So, and it was very interesting. So this was at the Environmental Secretariat, and luckily Lou had been at the conference in Rio de Janeiro, and Paul Anderson, who's known as Dr. T. Lud, some of you may know him, had brought a Tom Reed wood gas stove. And Lou bought it and took it back to Rio Branco. So we had that. So I'm demonstrating that here. And that is really an attention grabber. And here I am talking to the news media. And then here's the presentation the next day. I'm demonstrating the stove again. And this presentation, the first presentation was to the kind of environment department. And people were interested, but the second presentation was for the engineers and the agronomists. And these people really got it right away. And they, afterwards they're all coming up to me and saying, well, I've got this feedstock and I've got that feedstock, and would this work? And where do I get the machine? And so they were really, really fascinated. So as I said, Acre is considered to be one of the most progressive state governments in Brazil, I think largely because of that Chico Mendes heritage and the connection with the Labor Party. And it's also, there are a lot of foreign aid programs here, a lot of NGOs are working here. And the state also has this kind of professional class, and a lot of public funding being put into the sustainability effort. It's very striking when you compare it to the other Amazonian states and also the neighboring countries where the local governments are, it's kind of the old system of kickbacks, and they're in the pocket of the loggers and the miners and ranchers. So after, I kind of went there and planted a seed. I really feel I planted a seed. So it would be a good time for All Power Labs to maybe take a trip there, and I could set people up with contacts, or Jim, maybe your company, if you wanted to do some business in Brazil, I think this would be a good place. So I'm just going to, in lightning fast, run through the presentation, a few highlights from the presentation that I actually did for these people, just so you can see. This was, as long as the projector is lasting. This was a report on some biochar education I did, and I just explained that biochar school projects are popular all over the world. At IBI, we're collecting them on our website at a pretty high rate. This is a school where I worked in Southern Oregon. It's called the Dome School. We have a garden and a greenhouse. And I explained the whole philosophy of biochar and some of the activities we did, starting at the molecular level to teach about the carbon cycle and why biochar is important, making a sugar molecule out of sugar. They'll never forget that one. Demonstrating what is CO2? What is this stuff? You can't see it, taste it, smell it, hear it. What is it? Well, actually, if you can get some calcium hydroxide and dissolve it in water, and then blow into it with a straw, the CO2 will react with it to make calcium carbonate. Yay! And you can see the difference if you take a turkey baster or some other way of just blowing plain air into that same lime water, it'll stay clear. And one of our activities was making a tea lud. So I designed a tea lud that could be made with simple hand tools, no drills, no power tools, just can openers and nails and a pair of tin snips. And I had little kids making these things. I had 6- and 7-year-olds making these things. And they didn't cut themselves. I cut myself. They did it. It was amazing. Well, maybe a couple of them did. And they enjoyed it. They really had fun. And then we did some projects with biochar, and I had them bring in buckets of pee from home. Because that's how I've made biochar, is I've used urine and been successful with it. So, and then, we had to talk about it a lot. isn't it dirty? Isn't it nasty? You know, so we had to do a lot of education about urine.